Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga. I am super excited to join you here today for this episode of the show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by Offering Tree. Offering Tree is my number one software recommendation for yoga teachers and studio owners. They are a one-stop shop for all things yoga business, yoga studio ownership, and I really love how you can do everything with one login, one password, one payment, and one affordable payment at that. So I'm going to tell you more about Offering Tree a little bit later on, but if you guys want to go check them out, it's offeringtree.com/MBOM. You can do a trial there. You can get a discount if you want to sign up, and lots of good stuff. Today on the podcast, I'm really excited to be joined by Saskia Seeling. Saskia is a yoga teacher and a longtime listener of the podcast. So her and I have been in contact for a while. And over the last 4 years, she's been a self-employed yoga and meditation teacher. And she has shifted to supporting soulpreneurs like yoga teachers to set up what she calls their Soul Biz and share their unique magic with ease. And she found that she was getting asked the same questions over and over again. And so she shifted to working as a coach and consulting other yoga teachers, other soulpreneurs with their businesses. So I'm really excited about this episode because she's sharing her journey as a yoga teacher. She talks about what it's been like to shift gears into coaching, as well as we dive into 3 myths about starting your soul business or your yoga business and why they aren't true. And so this episode is just jam-packed with a lot of goodness, a lot of wisdom, a lot of really great golden nuggets. I'm not going to give away what the 3 myths are or anything, so you'll have to listen a little bit more to find out what those are, but I have a feeling that you're going to love this episode as much as I did. So without further ado, here is Saskia. Saskia, welcome to the show today. I'm really excited to have you here with me.
Thank you. I love being here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to connect with you today. And I'm curious if you can share with myself and listeners where you're joining us from.
I'm joining you from Hamburg in Germany. I am German, but I only moved back like a year ago after living abroad. So yeah, calling that place home now.
Yeah. What's it like to be back after so many years not living there?
Still kind of strange, I have to be honest. There are still days where I'm just not feeling well adjusted here, but definitely getting there.
Yeah, I hear that. I feel like I've been outside of Canada for so long, and I do go back like every year to visit and stuff, but the visits have been getting shorter and shorter. And I feel like every time I go back, I have kind of this like reverse culture shock of like, wait, is this my culture? I don't know anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely hear you there. And I'm excited to dive in with you. We've got a really exciting topic today, but before we get there, can you share a little bit with us about your story, how you got into yoga?
Sure. Yeah, yoga has been following me for quite a while. Like I still remember taking my first class when I was like 14 or 15 years old. My mom and grandma took me along, which was really fun. But I didn't really stick with it until a few years later. Like I was a dancer when I was younger. And so when I went to uni and just struggled quite a bit mentally there, yoga kind of found its way back to me. Like I was doing yoga with Adrian in my dorm, and that definitely saved me. And from there on, I just continued to practice yoga for quite a number of years while I was working corporate, and then I quit that job to travel around the world for 14 months. And then during that time, I feel like a space in my head kind of freed up. And there the idea plopped in to do a yoga teacher training, not necessarily with the intention to actually teach, just to dive deeper and learn more. And then when I actually did the training, it became obvious pretty quickly to me that I did want to teach, which I started right away after finishing the training. And yeah, from there, I just made it my business slowly, step by step, started to teach more, did more trainings, became certified as like a meditation teacher as well. And then later on started supporting people like me a few years ago who were just starting their yoga business to get that set up and get their gift out into the world.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's like so many synchronicities between your story and my story, which is really cool to hear. And I'm curious, once you did that yoga teacher training, were you still living abroad or were you back in Germany at that point teaching?
Yeah, I was living in New Zealand back then, and I did my first training in Bali. And it was actually pretty crazy. Like when I look back over that time, I definitely wonder where I took that courage from. Like I did my training, and before that, I had lived in New Zealand only about like 2 or 3 months. And then while I was on that training, I already applied for a teaching gig at the yoga studio I was frequenting as a student in New Zealand. And yeah, did like a trial class there. And, I was just fresh off of teacher training. And so the head teacher was like, well, maybe a couple of months, but then she actually got back to me much quicker than that. And yeah, from there on out, started teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. Like, way to just dive in. I feel like it's so interesting to look back on those moments and think like, wow, that was actually like kind of brave of me to like, do all of those things. And I think it's nice. It's nice to have that because especially when we're supporting newer yoga teachers, it's like we can remember how scary it was, but then we can also remember like how good it feels to kind of be brave and step out of your comfort zone and do those things that you're really excited about.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to be honest, like I definitely take my younger self as a bit of an inspiration right now, being in like a new city where I don't know anyone and trying to teach a little bit more in person here as well. I find it definitely harder this time around, probably because I did have some experiences in the past, but yeah, trying to be inspired by my younger self to just go out there and go after it.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's always a little hard, like in different places, particularly in different countries, because the culture of yoga shifts a little bit country to country, and it's kind of figuring out, how do people run the studios? Like, how do they want you to apply? How do they pay? How does like everything work? And it's more or less the same, but there are like little cultural differences. And especially, obviously doing it in a different language, even if it's your mother tongue, I feel like just kind of like throws you for a loop a little bit because you're doing it in a totally different way.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. Like teaching in German has been an experience.
Yeah, I know a couple of people who are like English is their second language. They speak fluently, but they learned to teach yoga in English. And so that's like what they do in English. They teach yoga. And so it's like trying to take it back to another language, even though it's like their mother tongue, it's what they grew up with, they speak it fluently, is still challenging because you're still like learning a different muscle, right? Like learning to teach yoga is learning to speak differently. And when you have to do that twice in another language, it's kind of like, oof, like brain is like that emoji that's kind of, coming out.
Yeah, totally. Like you develop all these phrases and the way you speak, and it becomes so natural at some point, and then you have to basically start at zero again because you can't use any of the words you've used in the past. Yeah, but it's a fun experience too, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, good learning experience. And so you've been teaching for 4 years now, is that right?
4.5, yeah, coming up to 5 actually.
Yeah, amazing. And so I'd love to hear kind of the overview of your business. Can you kind of walk us through like what you've been doing over the last like almost 5 years?
Yeah, so I'm definitely one of those people who like pivoted a lot and tried and errored my way through business. So I started out teaching like public classes, working for studios, and then offering my own classes as well. Did that for about say 8 months, and then started hosting like workshops on the side as well. Like I've offered women's circles and stuff like that. And then pretty quickly, someone approached me and was like, "So, do you want to host a retreat together?" And I was like, "Sure, let's figure it out." And we did, and it was such a great experience. So from then on out, I hosted retreats until about a year ago. And that was a great experience too. And with all of that, the business grew. I started to gain more like private clients as well. And then February 2020 rolled around, and I started a yoga studio with a partner, which wasn't the best timing at all in hindsight. So that business quickly faded again due to various reasons, broadly to do with the pandemic. And from there on out, I started to focus more on that one-on-one work. And because I also completed a meditation coaching certificate, I let that influence my work as well. And so right now, I'm basically only working with people one-on-one online. So it's more of a meditation and yoga coaching, I'd like to call it. And I also started to develop this new part of my business, like about a year ago, where I support people like yoga teachers and other soulpreneurs to set up their business and just help them get through these first trenches until they can run their business quite solidly. Yeah.
Hey, yoga teachers, we're just taking a quick moment from the episode to talk about Offering Tree. In the very first episode of this new season, I gave you guys a little update that I have moved my courses over to Offering Tree, and I am super, super, super excited about that. I also let you guys know that they had lots of changes happen in the last couple of months while we haven't been producing new episodes. So I'm really excited to share about those. One of the updates that I'm really excited to share about today is that you can now create powerful, limited intro offers with Offering Tree packages. Offering new customers a limited special offer is a tried and true strategy for getting new students and growing your business. But it puts us at risk of customers abusing these offers. So you can now limit how many times a package can be redeemed or set an expiration time to drive new signups without that fear of missing out or that worry of somebody just continuously buying this. So what does this look like in practicality? It means that for your yoga business or for your yoga studio, you can set up some sort of an intro offer that allows people to try your classes for 30 days or 1 week, whatever you want, at a certain discounted price. After that time period, you can set the package to expire, and you can also set it so that each new student can only do this one time, which makes it the perfect offer for new students coming to your studio or your classes for the first time. This is seriously a game changer for your business, and this is huge functionality within this software. So I'm super excited about this update, and I hope you guys are too. If you want to go check out more with Offering Tree and see more about what they have to offer for you and your business, head on over to offeringtree.com/MBO, where you can sign up for free, get a free trial, and also get a discount. Once again, that's offeringtree.com/MBO. All right, now back to the episode. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. You're actually the second person that I've talked to recently who opened a studio like right before the pandemic. And so it was like, a couple of months of in person. And then it was like, okay, we've got to pivot. We've got to go online. Pandemic seemed to go on forever, at least in my perspective. And it's like, how long can you carry like the rent and the overhead of a studio, right? When you can't have anyone in there.
Totally.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And I also so I founded the studio together with someone else, and there were definitely mistakes made there. Like we didn't know each other well enough, I would say, in hindsight. And so with the additional stress of the pandemic and the challenges that came along with it, it became apparent quite quickly to, I think, both of us that we weren't quite the best match because we couldn't really decide on the same direction to take the studio with these challenges. So yeah, definitely an experience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's too bad that didn't work out, but I do really feel like, these things kind of happen as they're meant to, and that we end up in the direction that we're supposed to. And it sounds like you were able to pivot pretty gracefully and kind of land in a little niche that you're really an expert in and that you specialize in. So I'm excited to dive into that a little bit. So why don't we get into the 3 myths about starting your soul biz? So yeah, I'll just kind of put it to you. Like what are these myths that people kind of think about when it comes to starting their businesses?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I see again and again is that people think that they have to have it all figured out. And I know I did in the past. Like you leave yoga teacher training and first you might think, well, I did like a month of training. I've learned all these things. And then pretty quickly you realize, well, I actually know very little about the tradition of yoga, about teaching. There's so much more I need to learn. And you start to compare yourself to all these people on Instagram or teachers you admire in person. And you're not them. You just finished your training. And then you probably start thinking, I have to become them before I can start my business and become successful. When actually the magic lies in the process. Like get out there and get started and take all your people along with you. Because I definitely found that to be true, that people celebrate your success and your progress and they want to see you evolve, and they definitely celebrate you for the courage to put yourself out there. So that's something I have to remind people of again and again when we start working together, that there's no magical border or certificate that they need to receive to finally be qualified enough or experienced enough to start a business, because you'll never get to that point. I feel like there's always more to learn, especially in yoga.
Yeah. I'm glad you shared that, because I do think that's true. And I think it's really easy to get a little bit stuck in the perfectionism mindset. And this can be around teaching, and it can also be around business, right? Because it's like, oh, I can't do this pose, or I don't know enough about the yoga history or philosophy, or I can't speak enough Sanskrit, I'm not ready to teach. And that can be really paralyzing, where it's like the only way to be ready to teach is to just start teaching. Like that's what we have to do. We have to just dive in and do it. And I think business is very similar. Like the well is deep, right? And things are constantly changing as well. The way people did business 10 years ago was very different from the way that people do business now. I mean, even let's look at the pandemic. The pandemic shifted the yoga industry hugely, like a 360. People weren't really doing yoga on Zoom pre-2020, which is weird to think about now, right? Like that there was so many people who'd never considered taking a yoga class on Zoom. And that's what so many people have been doing over the last 3 years. So I think it's just diving in, starting where you're at, teaching the people who resonate with you, knowing that there's always going to be people ahead of you and behind you. And we just keep learning and growing.
Totally. Yeah. And I think the pandemic is such a good example for that. Like you have to keep that beginner's mindset really throughout all of your business, because there will always be new challenges, new things to figure out, new things to learn. Like even if you are like solidified as a teacher and in your business, and then you take another course or you train with another teacher and you start not at zero, but you start as a beginner in that specialty or whatever it is again. And so having that courage and that trust that you're enough. I mean, that's basically the belief we have to find, right? That we're enough the way we are right now in that moment. That's, I think, really key to getting out there and sharing your magic, because there are always people who are ready for you. I think especially in yoga, that was something I had to learn quite a bit, that there are people at various stages on their path. And there are people who I wasn't the right teacher for in the beginning, and who maybe I'm not the right teacher even now. And that there are lots of students though who are maybe at the beginning of their journey, or who are looking at a specific angle that you're looking at yoga at. And so, yeah, I think it's always worth to put yourself out there and not to wait for a magical day that will really never show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember feeling this a lot when I started around teaching classes and feeling like very inexperienced and very much an imposter. But I remember feeling it even more so when I got asked to do privates. Like the first time, I guess the first 2 times I got asked to do a private, it was like, what do you charge and what do you offer? And I was like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know the answers to these questions. And then, I way undercharged because I was like, I literally don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm on Google looking this up, trying to figure out what do I charge and what do I offer and how is a private class different? Because I was never trained in that, right? It was kind of just like learn as you go, and kind of makes me smile back at like baby me thinking about that. But had I not said yes to those opportunities, I never would have had that experience. I would still have remained, like a baby private yoga teacher and I'd have, no experience.
Yeah, I agree. And I think pricing is such a good example for that, because I think everyone struggles with pricing. Like I still remember Googling, like, what does a private yoga teacher charge? And then nothing comes out, because I was living in New Zealand, and like most of the articles or tips that really don't help that you find online are like centered on America or like Canada maybe as well, but like really nothing about where I was teaching private classes. Oh yeah, the pricing, exactly. And then you charge whatever you feel like might be appropriate. It's probably too little. And then you teach maybe like these 5 classes that you agree to teach for that certain price. And then you learn how you react to that. Like, are you annoyed that you're teaching these classes and have to get up at that early hour, or whenever it is, for that price? That could be your hint that you charged a little too little. And so yeah, just really learning from these experiences, and you can only like learn from experience. There's not a lot that comes with like a handbook, I think, in teaching yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. And before we move on to myth number 2 that we're going to talk about, I wanted to ask you, for anyone who's feeling kind of like maybe they're not enough, or they're stuck in that imposter syndrome, or feeling like they just need to keep doing trainings because they're not ready. Do you have any tips for that person in terms of, just getting themselves out there?
Yeah, I think one way that always works is like teaching friends or families, people that really want to see the best in you. I mean, there are different challenges, I think, that come with teaching family and friends, but for the beginning, it can be a really, really great way to get started and to gather some confidence. And also like teaching something like donation-based classes. It doesn't work for everyone, but it works for a lot of people, because that financial pressure is out of the window. I think that often plays into it, that people think, well, this person just paid $20 for this class, and what if I disappoint them? And if it's, for example, donation based, then there's less of that pressure, and you can focus more on just building the skills and getting yourself out there and building that muscle that you're actually okay at what you do.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, let's dive into the second myth.
Yeah, so the second thing that I always encounter is that people think they have to hire to look professional. Like, you have to, when you start a business, you have to hire someone to like build a logo. You have to hire someone to build a website. You have to get professional pictures done, like all of the things. And like, they are definitely nice, and down the line, one day you will do them. But they aren't necessary. Like, you don't really need them. Like, I worked with like a logo I made up on Canva for, I think, the first 2.5 years at least in my business. Same with pictures, and like my website, I still do by myself, because, it's always a balance of what you hire out and what you can do yourself. There's always time and money involved. But there's no rule that everything has to be done by a professional for you to look professional or to act professionally in your business.
Yeah, I agree with this, because I think this is another thing that can really like paralyze people from getting started, because maybe they've spent a lot of the money that they did have saved on doing their training. Trainings can be a big price point. They can be expensive, and it's worth investing in a good one that you feel aligned with, of course. But then it's like, how do I get started on doing this in like a quote unquote professional manner? Like, a web designer can cost, upwards of like $5,000, which is not always feasible for people, especially maybe if you've like quit a job to start this and don't have a lot of income coming in. And I completely agree with you. I feel like I DIY'd like every single thing in my business to start out with. I've done like every iteration of my website. I've only just recently, brought on somebody who's helped kind of like spruce it up and make it a little bit prettier and stuff like that. And same with logos and headshots. For my first set of those, I did trades. So I traded a couple private sessions for the first logo that was designed. And I found somebody who was, she's somebody that I know. She was kind of getting just started with graphic design. And yeah, she was like willing to do a trade with me. And it was the same thing with the person who did my first like photo shoot and headshots, they were willing to do a trade for yoga. So I think it's like not everyone's interested in this. It's not something for everyone, but if you can find the right people in your network that might be interested in doing some classes with you, it's cool because you've got this service that you can offer, right? And it's great because you get to practice. Maybe they get some experience as well, and you get to kind of exchange your service and give each other feedback after.
Yeah, exactly. I think trades, I mean, there's always a good and a bad side to everything, but I think trades can be great if done right. And if you have the right people around you, they can be a great opportunity to get something started without, paying big bucks. And yeah, I did like the same with pictures. I did them for trades until I think a year ago, I actually paid for professional photos for the first time in my business. It can get you quite a way. And I think at the end of the day, of course, that's all really important because it's the first thing that speaks to people who don't know you in person. And yet it's not what makes you a great teacher. Like it's not what makes people return to you as a teacher. So I think it's always important to keep a balance with that. And especially like today, I think there are so many good tools to get stuff out there that still looks great, even though it's just done by you. Like you can do so much with a logo in Canva, like just your name or just a few forms, whatever. You can experiment with that. I did that for quite a few years, and people always like complimented me on my logo, and I'm definitely not a graphic designer. So I think almost everyone can do it for sure. I love working with Canva, actually. Like it's such a great tool, especially, if you want to get some consistency into your brand and across platforms and everything. I love like walking clients through that, like really step by step and setting it all up. Because I think once it's set up, it's really helpful and such a cheap alternative to hiring a professional graphic designer, for example.
Yeah, 100% agree. I like live and breathe Canva also. I feel like I'll say like Canva kind of makes me a graphic designer, even though I'm not a graphic designer. And so would definitely recommend that tool also. And then I think there's a lot of great tools and softwares that can really help us, if we're not like a web designer or a graphic designer, like we were saying, or even a photographer. I think, obviously there's Wix and Squarespace. WordPress is a little more complicated, but I think even they have a lot of like kind of easy to use templates. People on the podcast have heard me talk about Offering Tree incessantly. And I feel like they're definitely like my top recommendation for yoga teachers. And it's truly just because like, if you don't want to pay somebody, upwards of $5,000 for web design, you can go on Offering Tree and you can build your own site. And they've got these beautiful templates now. So their websites are looking like even better than they were before. And I feel like it just makes it a little bit simple. And there's like, nothing feels better than like doing this stuff yourself. I feel like, especially if it's not in your wheelhouse, like going on Canva and using their tools to design like a beautiful logo, and then being able to go on Offering Tree, for example, and design a beautiful website. And then I was going to say with photos too, like I feel like with the new cameras and stuff, it's like you don't necessarily need somebody to take professional photos. I still love professional photos for some instances, but I mean, I have like one of the newer iPhones, and it's got like portrait mode has so many options now. It's like so easy to take beautiful photos. I mean, all you really need is a nice background. If it's like an ivy wall or a brick wall or a white wall, do your hair how you like, put a little makeup on if that's your thing, and get somebody who can take your photos. And it doesn't need to be fancy, I don't think. Like, I think sometimes we just really complicate these things, and it doesn't need to be complicated, because while the branding and the design is important, so people kind of see what you're all about, we need to show up as great yoga teachers, right? Kind of like you said before, it's like, what our website looks like doesn't make us a better yoga teacher.
Yeah, totally. And I think especially with pictures as well in times of social media, I mean, nowadays you have to post more videos, but like basically if you want to post every day or like a couple of times a week, the number of pictures you would need from a professional photographer, like that's very price intensive. So yeah, I agree. Like the new phones definitely make it much easier. And like you find so many resources online as well on like how to take a nice picture of yourself, or like creative ways to set yourself up for a picture and to take like a creative selfie and stuff like that. I think if you get creative, there's really no need to hire out everything that you have to get done, and to instead really embrace the journey. Like, as you said, that feeling of accomplishment once you've set up your website, once you've posted that picture, or once you've created that logo. It's just really, really great.
Yeah, I completely agree. So thanks for sharing that one. And yeah, let's dive into the third one.
Yeah, the third one, I kind of titled Teach and They Will Come, because I think often we see teachers, especially on Instagram, like I think it's such a fake world in a way. And sometimes you see like these mega successful yoga teachers, and maybe they didn't even become successful on Instagram as a yoga teacher and then started working as a yoga teacher, and they put up a class and it's immediately sold out. And you're like, well, what's happening to my class? Because, you know, it takes time to build a clientele, to build your audience. And so don't compare yourself to these people, but what it takes instead is really the consistency of offering, for example, weekly classes and actually sticking to them, being like a reliable source for people to turn to for a yoga class. And to do the same on social media as well. If you find that social media is an avenue that supports you in your business, and to just do what it takes to get your name out there, to get your offering out there, and to show people what you have to offer.
Yeah, I think that this is really important. And yeah, I think it is really easy to go on Instagram and you start following some other yoga teachers, and you'll see some with, you know, smaller followings and others with bigger followings and a lot of likes on photos, and, you know, maybe beautiful professionally taken photos or videos. And I think it's just easy to get in comparison mode, right? And think that they kind of have it all together and whatnot. And I think it's really important for us to remember that social media is a highlight reel. You know, there's not, people are better at it now of being more authentic and genuine on social media, I think. But at the same time, I think it's still a highlight reel. Like, we're not seeing the grind and the hustle that these people with big followings and successful businesses have gone through. And I think that we need to remember that everyone started out as a beginner, right? Like, everyone started where we're starting. And I think just the times are different. Like, there are people who started out at a time where it was a really great time to be on Instagram. Instagram promoted their accounts and Instagram was not as competitive. And they were able to easily grow big followings. And it's not that easy to do that anymore. But there's other ways and opportunities that we have as yoga teachers if we're starting out now, right? Like, the fact that people are comfortable on Zoom gives us a great opportunity to start right into an online business. Whereas 10 years ago, somebody might have been having a lot of success with like photos on Instagram, but was anyone coming to a Zoom class?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. Yeah, that's a fair point. Like, times are definitely changing. And I think, yeah, you just have to find your avenue to promote your stuff, to get yourself out there. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for anyone who's kind of feeling a bit like, maybe like disgruntled with social media, or maybe a bit discouraged with social media? Like, they're putting a lot of time in, they're not really seeing any traction, like other kind of marketing tools or ways that they can connect with their people?
Yeah, I think it really depends with who you want to connect to. Like, when I work with people, we always do quite a big section focusing on like, who are your people? Because I think especially in yoga, there's often like this main perception of like vinyasa yoga is like the only route to go down, which obviously isn't true. And so, I think the first step is always figuring out who are your people, who are you naturally speaking to, who are the people who excite you. And then from there, you can kind of take a step back and look at what's the way these people communicate. Like, are they even on Instagram, or are they on like LinkedIn, for example? Are they maybe using Facebook, or aren't they using any social media at all? And a newsletter is much more important for you. Do you maybe, if you offer in-person classes, do you need to get like a business card out there in different locations for people to find you? So really depends on who you want to work with and how these people tick. But there's so many different ways, I think, to get yourself out there. And we're so often limited to the idea of Instagram as well, because I think it is yoga central in some ways. But what we often don't realize, especially I think with Instagram, is how narrow the focus of yoga there is. Like, I mean, it's definitely getting broader and better. And yet still the picture that you see when you type in yoga every damn day, it's always like a thin white person doing like acrobatics, basically. And so, I mean, that's one niche of yoga for sure, but it's not for everyone. Like there are so many ways to practice yoga. And so, yeah, it's really about figuring out who you are, who your people are, and how you get the two together, what avenue of communication you can use.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think that that's very true and about Instagram. And I think it's also when we think about like the people looking to practice yoga, like if that's intimidating for us as teachers, think about how intimidating that is for somebody who's like, hey, I've got back pain because I sit at a job all day. Like they're not looking probably to like learn a handstand. They just want some relief from their back pain, right? And I think something I've heard time and time again is like, oh, well, like what I teach isn't glamorous. Like it's not glamorous enough for Instagram. Like how do I take photos of, sitting in meditation or lying in shavasana or, just going into like a gentle twist. And I'm like, well, we can photograph that and we can put it with a caption that kind of explains what's happening. Like it doesn't have to be, super like acrobatic, like you said, it can be something that's very simple. And I think that there are people who are looking for that because I think there are people who are very intimidated by a lot of the like imagery and videos and stuff that are out there right now.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, the number of people who worked with me in the past and who said like, no, yoga is not for me. Like I've tried in the past, but someone tried to force me into like a forward fold and they were barely even getting their head below their hips, I think that's a real problem in yoga. And so if you feel like you're different, that's actually nothing bad. That's like something really, really great, I think. Like I still remember when I was doing yoga and I was posting something on Instagram, don't even remember what, but it was just really authentically about my practice. I was there in my like sweatpants and nothing glamorous about that for sure. And yeah, people messaged me how they enjoyed the picture of yoga and how much more accessible it felt to them and how much more they felt like they could actually practice yoga, comparing that to, the acrobatics.
Yeah, for sure. I was actually just talking with a mom friend of mine. She was like, a good friend prior. And then we had babies within 2 months of each other. And she was saying how like, oh, I'd really like to get back to like posting some content on Instagram. I'm ready to like be teaching a little bit more, bring in some more clients. She's like, I just feel like, I'm always in like just oversized sweatpants and my hair is in a bun and I don't have any makeup on. And she's like, I'm still like carrying some baby weight and I feel sensitive about that. And she's like, I just don't want to show up on video. And I was like, if you don't feel comfortable showing up on video, that's okay. There's that element of it where don't put that pressure on you if you're not ready to show up. But if you want to show up as you are, because people are going to relate to that. I think there's a lot of, and particularly like new moms who can relate to like living in sweatpants with their hair in a bun. They're not like straightening their hair and putting makeup on and, getting into the perfect outfit. It's like they just need to move a little bit and they need to move within the time and capacity they have. And she was like, oh yeah, that's like a really good point. And she's like, I'll try it and see how I feel. And so she started recording a couple videos and just showing up like, this is how I'm showing up today. This is what I'm wearing. This is how I look. And people did resonate with it. And it was really beautiful to see her kind of step into that because it felt like she was kind of owning just where she was at. And it didn't need to be like the perfect highlight reel, I guess. Like it felt more relatable and more like this is just somebody being real.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's the key to any kind of promotion. It's not trying to be someone else, but really kind of embracing who you are with everything, like even what you perceive as your flaws, because other people perceive it as something relatable, as something to connect to you about. And so, trying not to be someone else, like replicating an image of yoga that might be popular on social media, because there's so many more people out there who are just waiting for people like you, like whatever you do, just embracing that and showing up as your true self.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I love a great, cute yoga outfit. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's people out there that are like, it's a barrier, right? They're like, I can't spend $200 on a fancy yoga outfit. And I feel like a teacher showing up just like in a t-shirt and sweatpants is like, it's like permission to do the same, right?
Yeah, exactly. And because I think especially now that we're practicing yoga at home so much more often, like via Zoom or whatever it is, I think, yeah, that's permission to just do it, because I think it's often a barrier. You have a kid, how busy you are and how often like that falls off the table at the end of the day, because it's the last point on your to-do list. And then if there's the additional challenge of having to get changed into a cute set of yoga clothes and to setting up a perfect yoga space, then that is just really keeping people away from the practice. And so, yeah, being relatable and just showing that yoga is life, and you can consume or practice yoga wherever you are. I think it's a good way to get yourself out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I'm curious, you said before that you do some work with people around kind of finding who their ideal client is, or who they really want to be working with, talking to, targeting. Do you have any tips for somebody who might be kind of starting out with this and not really knowing, like, how do you find who these people are? Like, how do you find your people?
Yeah, so definitely the first step I always recommend to people, just as we talked about in the beginning, is to get yourself out there and to get teaching. Because you will notice pretty quickly the people who show up to your classes that you connect to and the ones you don't. Like it's just normal, I think, that to all classes, there will be people who, just aren't your wavelength for various reasons. And there are other people who you're really excited about, or maybe even like nervous about teaching, because they are so great in your eyes. So experience is definitely the first step. Like the more you teach, the more you learn who the people are you want to work with and who the people are you don't want to work with. And then the second side of it is kind of self-knowledge. And that, I think, really depends what kind of technique resonates with you. I use tools like human design with my clients to kind of explore what are your strengths and what do you have to give. But I know that's not for everyone. So you have to find what works for you. So getting to know yourself and what you have to offer, what magic you carry, and kind of matching that to the people who need that in their lives.
Amazing. Yeah. I love human design. And I feel like finding out my human design was very gave me permission, I think, to lean into who I am a little bit more.
For sure.
And I guess it's kind of like sad in a way to live in a world where you kind of need permission to be who you are. But at the same time, I feel like there's like a lot of shoulds out there. Like, we should be doing this. We should be doing this. And for me, it was, I should just pick one niche. I should just focus on one thing. I'll be more successful with this. And I was like, that just doesn't like draw me in. That's not what I want to do. And when I found out that I'm a manifesting generator and that they thrive with their hands in lots of pots, I was like, okay, I can just keep doing what I'm doing. I can stop trying to force choosing one thing in my life and recognizing that this is actually one of my strengths.
Yeah. I think it's such a permission, or for me as well, it was a permission giving tool. I'm a projector, and I definitely loved receiving the permission to rest and incorporate more rest into my day, and not having to hustle morning to evening, and kind of having I guess justification of not being able to work like 9 to 5 every day of the week. I love that. And I mean, there are so many little nuggets that come out of your human design that you can dive into, and it's always like a whole new world. I really love that, and I love incorporating that with clients who like to look through that lens at themselves and at their business.
Yeah, I love that. I have a couple of friends who are projectors who've said the exact same thing. They were like, it was kind of permission to lean into the ideal schedule that, you had some sort of inkling or intuition that this is what you wanted to do, yet society tells you you need to work X amount of hours, this time to this time. And if you don't, you're lazy or you're not doing enough, et cetera, et cetera. And knowing this is actually how I thrive and do my best work is pretty cool.
Totally. Yeah. And it definitely also related to how I was teaching yoga. Over the years, it became pretty clear to me that I was teaching very slow yoga. Like I was typically teaching like gentle flow classes or very quiet, very slow yin yoga classes and yoga nidra. And there was always this component in me that thought, well, but you should do more like vinyasa. You should be more active in your classes, or like in a quiet yin yoga class, you should talk more and stuff like that. And so I think seeing that through this human design lens really allowed me to just lean into that and not force myself to love vinyasa when actually I really love teaching yin yoga.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. It's really great that you were able to lean into that and do what really serves you.
Yeah.
And in turn, your students.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the thing, like the more authentic you are, the better you can serve your students at the end of the day. So it's always for a greater good if you want to see that.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing all of this great information and to talk about these 3 myths. I feel like this has been super, super beneficial. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, are there any other business lessons that you've learned through your career that you want to share with listeners today?
I mean, there's so many. I try to keep it to 1 or 2, but the biggest for me is definitely listening to your intuition. I've definitely tried to override my intuition in the past a number of times, kind of allowing people to pressure me maybe into paths or directions that at the innermost part of myself I felt weren't quite right for me. And then it always turned out just not a great situation. And then in the end, I always kind of had to get out of that situation, but it was so much more dramatic than if I had said right from the start, no, that's not right for me. I can't say why, but that's what my intuition tells me. So I think that's a very big one. Just follow your intuition. And maybe as a second one is, I mean, we already talked about it, but getting yourself out there and trusting that people support you. I mean, especially on social media, I've experienced so much support from people that I've met in the past, I'm not even friends with now, but who just love that I went down this path. And so, yeah, really leaning into support, I guess, at the end of the day, and trusting that it is there in ways that you maybe can't even grasp or imagine right now, but that most often at least shows up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always so interesting when you share things like who comes out of the woodwork from your past. It's like, hey, I'm interested in buying this course, or, doing a program with you, or joining a class or something. And it's like, oh, I didn't even know you were interested in this or interested in supporting me, or that you even like looked at my stuff type thing. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing. Well, you've shared so much good stuff here today. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm curious, can you share with listeners where they can go to find you, where they can learn more about you, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, they can go to my website, Saskia Seeling. Well, it's a weird name to pronounce in English, but I'm sure you put it in the show notes, .com. And then you can always find me on Instagram. And I'm actually exploring LinkedIn at the moment because we were talking about different social media avenues. So yeah, these 3 platforms are usually the way to find me. And you can always like message me. I'm always happy to chat to anyone who's curious or has questions. And yeah, all the infos about working with me, programs, etc., is there.
Amazing. And you're Saskia Seeling on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. Well, we will put links to all of that in the show notes so that people can go follow along with you and see what you're up to. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. This has been just a really wonderful conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed that.
All right, my friend, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Saskia Seeling. Make sure you go check her out, give her a follow, and maybe even work with her if you feel called to do so. And for me, it's just really cool after all these years of running MBOM and doing MBOM to see these cycles of yoga teachers who are brand new when I started the podcast and have now really built their business over the last couple of years. And to be able to bring a longtime listener onto the show like Saskia is really fun for me. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. A big thank you to Offering Tree for sponsoring this episode. Make sure you guys go give them some love. Offering offering.tree.com/MBOM or follow them on any platforms. Offering Tree, if you have any questions about them, make sure you reach out to them or myself. Always happy to chat about if it's a good fit for you. And thank you for listening. I really couldn't do it without you listening to the podcast, being here, supporting the show. So thank you so much, and we will see you next week. All right, bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.